USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
Well, the story about my dad is, during the war, he was in the 1874th Combat Engineers. My mom and my grandmother were in the local movie theater in Yonkers one night, and they had the newsreels back then, and the newsreel came on, and it was the next thing you know, you see a line of GIs going ashore, and for about a second and a half, there's my dad chest deep in water going ashore. Later on, subsequent to his passing, I was watching the History Channel, and they have a program, World War II in color. So I'm watching it, and it goes along, and next thing you know, battleships are up bombarding the beaches, landing craft form up, and then there's my dad going ashore in color. Right there is my dad with the cigarette. I was born in Bronxville, New York, raised in Yonkers, went to school there, and all the way through high school, and wound up going to junior college in Flushing at the Academy of Aeronautics for airplane mechanics. And while I was there, I started flying in a flying club. And then I realized that wrenches and myself just really weren't meant for each other. And I really liked flying. So I continued on after that. I went to the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, took the professional pilot course. And this is all in the mid-60s. And by the time I finished there, I'd finished my 4 years of deferment. I wanted to fly, so I wound up enlisting in the Army in the Warrant Officer Flight Program, helicopter flight program. This is Private Drago, entry into the United States Army, 1968. And from there, went to basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And from Fort Polk, went to Fort Walters, Texas for primary helicopter school. Was selected for fixed wing, and then from there, went to Fort Stewart, Georgia. That's me, right?
Hold on, let me get a close-up of that.
Right there.
There you go.
So fortunately, when I got to Fort Walters, we were only there for a day or so, and they came out with this announcement that they had 20 openings for fixed-wing pilots, and people with prior service and or prior flying time could apply. And then I did, and there was a lot of people applying. And then when it came to me, I didn't have my logbook, but I made sure I had my pilot's licenses with me. So when I got there, it was my pilot's license and what's your background and this and that. And then graduating from pilot training as a WWII aviator, I was selected for the OV-1 Mohawk transition. This is our training class. Again, that's me. This is at Fort Rucker, Alabama.
You got the nice mustache.
Yeah, I'm trying. And then from there, we had to go to electronic warfare school out at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And then there was a short leave period, and then it was off to Vietnam. That's our Nomex flying suit right there.
That's great.
And then here again, getting ready to go fly. Part of my equipment on. Went to the 223rd Aviation Battalion in Quy Nhon. And from there I was assigned to the 225th Aviation Company Aerial Surveillance at Phu Hep, Vietnam, which was in Central 2 Corps on the coast.
And where are you at for this?
This is Phu Hep, Vietnam. You see the wall in the background? That's part of the revetments.
Gotcha.
First, you had to go through an in-unit checkout. They took you up and fly and make sure you could fly the airplane. We had a crew of 2. You had an enlisted observer that ran the sensor equipment and 1 pilot. So you could fly the airplane by itself. You didn't need anybody, but if you were flying a mission, you needed a crew member. And they were called technical observers. And they would run the sensor gear. So you got checked out, and then initially you flew pretty easy missions. Actually, what we called a dollar ride, my very first mission, I went with an experienced pilot, and I was the observer. And we wound up flying up on the northwestern border of 2 Corps of Laos and Vietnam. And we had to go up on a day photo mission, which was pretty nice, get to see the countryside. But there again, flying up there, all the tactical radar, all the tactical frequencies, I didn't really have a clue really what was going on. It was just like, wow. And we had 4 radios in the airplane, so you're hearing all this chatter over these different frequencies, and it was a little overwhelming, but you kind of get into it as you get going. And then we flew up there, we did our mission. This captain was great. He goes, you know, I think I know where they're using heavy equipment right across the fence. Let's go take a picture of it. Okay, sir. We roll over, and the next thing you know, we're high speed down this valley, and there's some enemy equipment out there working, and we go by, and I set the camera up, we're taking pictures, and I look out the window on this side, and I see twin rows of golf balls coming right by my window. We were taking fire from a twin 50 caliber machine gun, and then on the observer side, the mic buttons were on the floor. You had to transmit externally and then internally transmit. I think it took me 10 minutes to find that mic button, but it was really only a millisecond to scream, because he's looking out this side and he didn't see it. To scream we were taking fire, and then next thing you know, I mean, we're pulling 10 Gs getting out of there. And so that was my initial flight in Vietnam, my initial mission. This is taxiing out to go on a mission. This is a PSP, which is corrugated metal laid down, and it had a concrete airstrip. And then again here, minefields all around. So, and this would be part of our inner perimeter. This was a company photograph of 225th. Right there. Oh, there I am. And there was different missions. We had day and night regular photographic missions, and we had infrared photography, and then we had side-looking airborne radar. Those three different types of missions. The day or night photo was regular, go out and photograph. We had a belly camera and a nose camera. The belly camera was either vertical or it was 15 or 30 degrees oblique on either side of the airplane. And then we had a panoramic nose camera for taking out in front. Using the belly camera, you could take pictures from very low to very high. The panoramic nose camera was designed to be very, very low near the ground. That was pretty exciting. It seemed like the altitude was about 75 feet off the ground, and fly that. So that was, yeah, it was pretty sporty. It was fun. And then we had the side-looking airborne radar, and that was designed pretty much to fly up and down the border or along the coast. And with that, you were looking for moving targets. And it had printout screen. It was about a 3-minute delay of printing what you were going over. And it had a real faint background, negative. And any moving targets would show up as black spots. So the observer could plot those, and sometimes we'd either call a gunship or you could call an artillery fire with that. But that was for gathering intelligence, because all this information would come back and be read out by our imagery interpretation section, and then reports would be sent up to see what actions were going to be taken. And then the last one was our infrared photography. And that was designed, flew all night. It was, you had a hot detector and a cold detector in there, and it would detect heat. And the one side was cold detector, it would come out looking like a negative. And then adjacent to that was the hot side, and any hot target you flew, like a campfire, truck engine, or anything like that, would come up black. And from that, observer could plot coordinates off of that, and you could call up artillery or air if it was there, or again, it was all looking for intelligence, seeing where they were coming through. And we did a lot of that. And that was really the most dangerous mission, because it was all night, low level, for us up in the mountains. This is an aerial photography from our camera system. That's me flying underneath the airplane, getting my picture taken. Kind of fun.
They did a good job.
Yeah, they almost got the wink. Almost. Or that was me, I wasn't quite lined up. And then here's another aerial photograph of our ramp area. And these are all revetments where we kept the airplanes in. If under attack, if one airplane blew up, it might not get the rest of them. You know, protected all the airplanes. This is an oblique photograph out on a mission. This is a fuel tank. And yeah, just a pretty waterfall. It's a beautiful country out there. It'd be nice to see if you could get out there. So, and this cover plate is where the panoramic nose camera goes. Oh, here's another. That's the same one, I guess, just enlarged. Yeah, that's better. In January 1971, I'd taken off for an early morning infrared mission, and Tuwa Tower called me and said, can you make radio contact with, the call sign was Big Windy, and I forget the number. It was a CH-47 that had come up. It didn't come in. There was a flight of 3, 2 of them made it in and one didn't. So I started putting out, broadcasts on their tower frequency and then on emergency frequency, no contact. So they asked me if I could go over and look at a particular place, and I went over there and started looking. Still calling, no contact. And then it got to where I kind of had to leave to go fly the mission, and I asked the towers, if you declare him missing, I'll stay here and start the search. And they said, yeah, he's down. So I stayed and then flew all around where I could in the night, and it was a low overcast, down along the shoreline and up where his intended route kind of brought him, and couldn't find anything. And then as it got light in the morning, they'd already started calling in for a search, and that was controlled by King Aircraft. That was an Air Force unit out of Saigon, I think. So, and then I kind of had a hunch. I knew where he was because there were foothills that led up into mountains, and he had to come down, let down along that route. And told my observer, I said, I think I know where they are. I said, if you're willing to go, we'll go back up there and look, because it was shrouded in clouds and fog. And I said, yes, sir. So we wound up going back up this valley, and we came up to the end of the valley, and like I say, extremely poor visibility, and looked down, and there was a gray ash outline of a CH-47. The 2 transmissions were in it, and I didn't think anybody survived because it had burned up. And marked it, came back down, called back in, said I found it. And the battalion commander was leading the search and rescue from the local side, and they were coming down. So I told them where it was, and they didn't understand where I was telling them to go. So I said, okay, there's a fire base down here. I'll meet you over the fire base, and I'll lead you back in there. So here comes the WWII, and they're doing 90 knots. And I got flaps down and everything else, and I lead him back up in the valley to where we found it. And then I had to kind of just barely skirt over the hills and come around. And next time I came around, I actually had to fly under the helicopter to stay where I could see. And they found 4 crew members out of the 7 that were still alive there. Wow. And then when I got back, it was too late to go fly the mission, and when I got back, then I was called in, and I was told that I was put in for the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism. Getting ready to go fly. You can see the ejection seat here, and you're all strapped in. And you were strapped in. You had 6 points to be strapped into the ejection seat. Your legs were strapped in, your waist was strapped in, and your shoulders were strapped in. And the reason for the legs being strapped in, because your legs were up under the instrument panel to work the rudder pedals. But if you ejected and they weren't pulled back into the seat, your legs would get cut off. So part of that was to pull your legs back in flush to the seat. Our unofficial motto was kind of unarmed, alone, and afraid. We're out there, and particularly over in Laos and Cambodia, I always flew with 2 radios on me and had a radio in the survival kit in the ejection seat. I said, if I'm lucky enough to get out, then I'll sit under a bush and just until somebody comes and get me. And in Laos and Cambodia, they didn't take prisoners. In Vietnam, they might take you, but up in North Vietnam, they were taking prisoners. But over there, very rarely did they take a prisoner. So, yeah, they always just said, save the last bullet for yourself. Scary thought. Here's on a mission. Those are fuel tanks, 150-gallon drop tanks. Yeah, if you didn't have the fuel tanks, you were limited to about 2.5 hours max flying. With these, you could go 4.5 hours.
Wow.
So, extended mission. And this is what the airplane was capable of. It had 6 wing stations. You could carry a lot of rockets or bombs and machine guns. So, somebody having a good time.
Yep.
In May of 1970, we did an invasion into Cambodia in Central 2 Corps. And that morning, I was assigned a photo mission in Cambodia, but I had to fly over to Camp Holloway, which is an Army airfield in Pleiku, which is a pretty good sized city in central Two Corps, in central Vietnam. So I fly in there that morning, and that was the first time that I really realized I was in a war. Because you landed, we taxied in, there were helicopters everywhere, there were infantry just all sitting down the sides of the taxiway, you know, their rucksacks full of everything, ammunition hanging off them and everything, and they're waiting to load up and go to Cambodia. But an interesting thing, even coming in there in the dark, it looked like the sun was coming up in the west. The B-52 strikes that were going on there was just lit up. It just looked like the sunrise going over there. And then obviously we went in, you know, got briefed on the mission that we had to fly, and flew over to Cambodia, did the mission, you know, and went home. But that was my first kind of inkling of really what the war was. So, and then I went up to fly a mission up in Pleiku, which is up in the Central Highlands, and they'd just come back from an operation, and they had all these enemy weapons set out. And these are all 51 caliber machine guns, not good for airplanes. And then there's another one here.
Wow.
And these are all POWs, you know, setting up the displays. So.
And where was this again?
In Pleiku, in the Central Highlands. And in this, it wasn't all work. We had some fun. The pilots had party suits. These were made over in Thailand, and you can see we celebrate it. And
who's the gentleman with you?
yeah, it's Pat Walters. He was killed in a plane crash up in Alaska on a civilian side, so unfortunately.
And the guy in the background?
That's Jim Thomas, good fellow. So, here again, barbecue duties. That was Captain Walters. This is Captain Jim Keene. He was my roommate for a while. He retired from Frontier, and he lives out in Colorado now. So, we had a first sergeant that was a great scrounger, and he scrounged up a couple surfboards, so got to use that. And another thing was he scrounged up some dive gear. So we'd go down and hire the local papasan, give him a carton of cigarettes. This is in Tuy Hoa and Phu Hep, Vietnam, Central Two Corps, Vietnam, on the coast. I had a lot of diving time in, so we were teaching some of the young enlisted guys, and we'd take them right to the beach. So I'd take this one young fella down, and we're coming up to this rock island, and the stones were massive. They're half the size of your house. I mean, just massive, massive stones. And as we come around the corner, I see the biggest moray eel I've ever seen in my entire life. His head was like this wide, and we were like facing each other, you know, and I'm kind of backing up, and he's kind of backing up, and my God, I couldn't believe they were that big. And then he kind of backed off and went away, and I turned around to look at this kid. You know, his mouthpiece was out, his eyeballs were this big, you know. Got his mouthpiece back in and took him back up to the boat, you know, and I get him up, and he's calming down, and said, "Are you okay?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "Did you see the size of that moray eel?" He goes, "No, but did you see that shark?" One of the things I got to do flying, you know, occasionally pilots from other units would get to go for a ride, and our people could, you know, get to go ride in a helicopter or something like that. And I had a young gun pilot. He flew helicopter, Charlie Marlow gunships. And he was a young guy. You know, I'm 23 or whatever, and he's probably 20, so I'm going, a young kid. And his whole mission in life was to go out and shoot nails and kill gooks. I mean, that's what he was charging. And nails were the flechette rockets, you know, if you caught them out in the open. So anyway, I got to take him up on a mission, and it was kind of a day boondoggle. It wasn't a real serious mission, but it was a photo mission, and it was relatively easy to operate the camera and stuff. So he got briefed on how to do that. And we flew up to northwestern Two Corps up on the Laos border, and we did our mission. And it was a beautiful afternoon. And you know, it's hot down low, and you've got all your survival gear on, and you're strapped in the airplane, and it gets hot. So I asked him, I said, "When was the last time you were cool?" He goes, "Well, when I was in the States." I go, "Okay." So we climb up to like 10,000 feet up to go home. And it's, you know, it's cooler up there. So, and then all of a sudden I noticed two Air Force A-1E Skyraiders, which are attack airplanes, and they carry lots of guns and bombs and everything else. And they're in a formation, like this, and I'm over here, and I call them, on guard, which is emergency frequent, everybody on it, but they don't answer me. So, and they're flying, so I go, oh, come on, let's join up, you know. So I fly in and I join up. So you got lead number 2 and I'm number 3. And then, you know, they look at me and you know, we're looking at them and this young, and the gun pilot, he's sitting in that seat and he's taking pictures and stuff. And then all of a sudden I see lead, his canopy closes. And his canopy closes. And I go, okay, I know what's going to happen. Next thing you know, lead goes, boop. He pulls a split S and 2 goes up and then 3 goes right with him. And as we're down here doing this vertical dive going down, all I hear is this scream from the other seat. So that was fun for me, and it was definitely fun for this young pilot, helicopter pilot. And you know, and then it was goodbye and we went on home, you know, so that was pretty interesting. The VC NVA had green tracers, and a lot of times it was like golf balls coming by you. And at other times, if it was like a ZSU 23-4, which is a 23 millimeter 4-barrel cannon, or, you know, they look more like, not golf balls, but like tennis balls. And then if you were up north and you'd see like a 110 millimeter being shot, it looked like basketballs coming by you. And the first time, it was mesmerizing. You look down and you see a burst of them and they come up and they're weaving. And you go, wow, look at those, you know. And they're slow until all of a sudden they're, you know, they just go right by you and you go, holy gee, I gotta get the hell out of here, you know. And you do, but that's just a different size, so you can kind of know what you're being shot at by just seeing the different size tennis balls, golf balls. I came home after one mission, and I go back in the hooch and I sit down and I just start shaking. I can't control it. And I can't go see anybody. Can't go to the flight surgeon because I don't want to get grounded, you know, or anything else. And you just sit there and eventually it kind of goes away. And I mean, you don't share that with anybody. There's just so much fear built up after a while. It just finally comes out, you know. And is it, you know, you're sitting there, is it going to go away, you know? And I had that twice. And there again, don't talk to anybody about it. Just.
And how many missions altogether did you fly?
221.
Oh, wow. So 221 missions in a year. So yeah, almost a mission a day.
Almost, yeah. Well, it was very quick. You know, I came home and it was I mean, I flew back and I can't even remember, but I think through San Francisco and just got on another airplane and came to New York, you know, and then my wife and my family picked me up, you know, and then it was put the uniform in the closet. And then like 6 weeks later, I'm back at school. But I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and they had a big military component down there at the school. So, you know, so I was kind of with the brothers in arms, but, you know, still back in the academic environment and that kind of stuff. So, and then moved to Atlanta from Florida, which was the first big city heading back north, and got in the Georgia National Guard. And I got a job flying for a company there. And then a friend of mine said, you know, there's this little company out in Little Rock called Federal Express, if you want to come out and get a flying job, because none of the airlines were hiring. That was in the fuel crisis back then. So I said, oh, I could do that for a year or so. And then wound up getting hired on by Federal Express. And then the rest is history. I just wound up staying there for 33 years. But I continued flying in the Georgia Guard for 15 years. So I flew 17 years in the Mohawk. I lost four brothers in arms in the Guard. So yeah, it's a dangerous profession. Some of the interesting missions was we worked for 7th District Coast Guard and the Joint Task Force on Drugs. We flew all over the Bahamas and the North Caribbean, you know, looking for drug folks. And then occasionally missions would come in from different organizations or something, you know, and sometimes they wanted a thermal study of something or a photographic study, and we could take pictures of this or something. And then from there, I transferred to United States Military Academy at West Point, and I did another 12 years worked in the admissions for West Point, and then retired. Yeah, for the last 12 years, I've been flying for the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I'm an aircraft commander for them. I fly out of Islip with the unit there. And the missions we fly are coastal patrol, search and rescue, In 2013, I was inducted into New York State Veterans Hall of Fame by Senator Laval. This is up in Albany. My daughter accompanied me.
That's really nice. What'd that mean to you?
It meant a lot to be recognized. You know, Vietnam guys weren't treated really well. You know, it was come home, take off your uniform, and just go on. And, yeah, it's nice to be recognized, finally. Well, I get mixed feelings about the war. You know, we lost it politically. We didn't lose it militarily, and it's really a shame. You know, we went there on a mission to help, and everybody in uniform did the best they could to do what they had to do, you know, and it was the politicians that really, you know, screwed up the war. You know, they had us fighting a war with one hand and one foot tied behind your back, you know, with all these rules of engagement and all this other stuff. We could have ended it very quickly, and, you know, and we didn't. So, yeah, and then with the anti-war sentiment at home, didn't make it easy, you know, coming back. But I learned a lot. You know, I survived. I learned a hell of a lot. And, you know, I learned what it is to be a man and have to do what you have to do. And like you said, shoulder the responsibilities of getting out there and doing it. Although at the time, you don't really think about that. You just saddle up and get down and do the job. And I was kind of tough on the observers. You know, everything had to be right. And I don't know, some of them didn't take to that as well, but they always said, go with Mr. Drago, will always get you home. And I can say that for my whole career, airlines, everything. Just, thank God, I always brought everybody home. So what else can you say to that? Yeah. You know, safely, so.